Watch what happens when a king leaves his throne for a month. The kingdom doesn't fall apart. Something stranger happens. People start whispering, rumors spread. His name gets mentioned in every conversation. His absence becomes the most present thing in the room. Now, watch what happens to the king who sits on his throne every day, visible to everyone, available to every request. He becomes invisible. This is the paradox of power that Machiavelli understood centuries ago. Constant visibility breeds contempt. Strategic absence breeds reverence. You think your presence makes you important. It doesn't. It makes you ordinary, predictable, something the world expects and therefore ignores. But your absence forces the world to remember you exist. Machiavelli said it clearly. Men value more the things they find hard to obtain, not the things sitting in front of them, not the people who show up every single day, the things that vanish, the people who withdraw, the forces that refuse to be controlled. Here's the truth that will change everything. You've been playing the game backwards. You thought being seen created power. You thought being accessible created respect. You thought constant engagement made you matter. It did the opposite. It turned you into background noise. When you disappear, something shifts. The algorithm of human attention rewrites itself. Your value doesn't decrease, it multiplies, because scarcity is the only currency that never loses worth. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. Absence creates power. Society is a cage designed to keep you visible and available. They want you online, responding, reacting, posting, commenting, always present, always engaged, always giving your attention to whatever they put in front of you. Why? Because visibility makes you controllable. When you're always there, always responsive, always participating, you're predictable. And predictable people have no power. They're sheep following the herd, convinced their constant presence matters. It doesn't matter. It just makes you easier to ignore. The game is simple. Availability destroys value. Scarcity creates it. This isn't about relationships. This isn't about playing hard to get. This is about understanding the fundamental law of power that governs everything from ancient kingdoms to modern social dynamics. When you're everywhere, you're nowhere. When you're always speaking, nobody listens. When you're constantly available, you become a tool that people use and discard without thinking twice. But strategic withdrawal? That's different. That's declaring that your presence has weight, that your time isn't free, that access to you is earned, not assumed. Most people will never understand this. They're addicted to visibility, terrified of being forgotten. They think disappearing means losing relevance. They're wrong. Disappearing is how you gain it. Withdrawal isn't retreat. It's a psychological weapon. It's you refusing to play by rules designed to keep you weak. What I'm about to reveal are 7 principles that Machiavelli would recognize instantly. 7 laws that transform absence from weakness into dominance. 7 truths that separate those who get used from those who hold power. This isn't theory. This is how the game actually works. Strip away the comfort. Embrace the discomfort of your own absence, because when you vanish, the world finally notices you were there. Number 1. The power of withdrawal. There's a specific type of panic that sets in when someone loses access to you. Not the dramatic kind, not the obvious kind. It's subtle. It creeps in slowly. They check their messages. They wonder why you haven't replied. They start questioning what changed. This is psychological imbalance, and you created it without saying a word. See, human minds hate unfinished business. They hate unanswered questions. They hate when patterns break. Your presence was a pattern. Your availability was predictable. Your responses were guaranteed. Then you stopped, and their mind can't handle it. This is what withdrawal actually does. It doesn't make you forgotten. It makes you the only thing they can think about, because the brain doesn't focus on what it has. It obsesses over what it lost. You were never more present than when you disappeared. Machiavelli once said, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." But here's the deeper truth buried in his work. Intelligent rulers know when to be absent. They understand that constant visibility makes them ordinary. Strategic absence makes them legendary. Think about every powerful figure throughout history. They weren't powerful because they were always available. They were powerful because getting to them was nearly impossible. Their time was guarded. Their presence was rare. Access to them was a prize, not a guarantee. You've been doing the opposite. You've been the person anyone can reach any time, the person who drops everything to respond, the person whose door is always open. And what did that create? Familiarity, comfort, the assumption that you'll always be there. Withdrawal shatters that assumption. It introduces doubt. It creates distance. It forces people to confront the possibility that maybe you won't always be available. Maybe you have boundaries they never noticed. Maybe you're not as easy to control as they thought. This is uncomfortable for them. Good. Discomfort is what makes people reassess value. When you're always present, you become part of the furniture. Expected. Ordinary. Something they walk past without noticing. But absence? Absence breaks the illusion of permanence. It reminds them that your presence isn't guaranteed, that you could choose to stay gone. And that terrifies them more than they'll admit. Silent withdrawal is the most violent form of communication. It says everything without saying anything. It tells them that something shifted, that you're not playing by the old rules anymore, that access to you now has conditions they don't understand yet. They'll try to figure out what changed. They'll replay conversations. They'll wonder if they said something wrong. They'll check to see if you're active elsewhere, if you're ignoring them specifically, or if you've genuinely disappeared. All of this mental energy, all of this attention is now focused on you, the person who isn't even there. This is the power of withdrawal. You become more influential in your absence than you ever were in your presence. Now, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. Silence breaks illusions. Number 2, the illusion of constant availability. You were trained for this. From childhood, they taught you that being available means being good. Answer when called, show up when needed, be there for everyone, drop what you're doing to help, never leave anyone waiting. And somewhere in that training, you learn to abandon yourself. Because constant availability isn't kindness. It's self-destruction. It's saying your time has no value. Your energy has no limit. Your life exists to serve whoever demands it. This is how they condition compliance, make you believe that boundaries are selfish, that saying no makes you bad, that protecting your time means you don't care. It's a trap, and you walked right into it. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, you kill a piece of yourself. Every time you make yourself available when you need rest, you teach the world that your needs don't matter. Every time you respond immediately, you train people that your attention is cheap. This isn't about being cold. This isn't about not helping people. This is about recognizing that unlimited availability is psychological slavery. Machiavelli once said, "Men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims for his deceptions." You've been the victim. The immediate need was someone else's. The deception was that meeting it made you valuable. It didn't. It made you useful. There's a difference. Useful people get used. Valuable people get respected. When you're constantly available, you're a resource to be extracted, a tool to be picked up when needed and put down when not. People don't think about tools, they just use them. But when you become unavailable, when access to you becomes limited, when your time suddenly has conditions, you stop being a tool. You become a person they have to consider, plan around, respect. This shift doesn't happen because you announced it. It happens because you embodied it. You stopped answering every call. You stopped responding within seconds. You stopped rearranging your life to accommodate everyone else's schedule. And suddenly, your time meant something. Here's what nobody tells you about saying yes all the time. It doesn't make people like you more. It makes them respect you less. Because deep down, everyone knows that people who stand for nothing fall for everything. People who have no boundaries get walked over. People who never say no have no sense of self-worth. You thought being available made you important. It made you forgettable. Because important people are hard to reach. Important people guard their time. Important people understand that scarcity creates demand. Your aura, that invisible force that makes people take you seriously, dies every time you make yourself too available. Every instant response, every dropped plan to accommodate someone else, every moment where you put others before yourself without them earning it. That's not generosity. That's self-abandonment. And the worst part, people don't even value what you're giving. They expect it. They assume it. They get annoyed when you suddenly can't deliver what you've been delivering for free all along. This is the psychology of constant availability. It doesn't create gratitude. It creates entitlement. Breaking this pattern requires something most people can't handle: disappointing others. Letting messages go unanswered, not showing up, creating space where there used to be constant presence. It feels wrong at first. You'll feel guilty. You'll worry people will think you've changed for the worse. You'll wonder if you're being selfish. You're not. You're being sane. Because the alternative is spending your entire life responding to other people's agendas while your own life slips away, unexamined. The alternative is being the person everyone can count on while you can't count on yourself. The alternative is reaching the end and realizing you were always available for everyone except the one person who needed you most: yourself. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. No is self-preservation. Number 3, persona versus individuation. There are two versions of you. The first is the mask, the persona, the version you created to survive in society, the one that smiles at the right times, says the right things, behaves according to expectations. This version exists to be accepted, to fit in, to not cause problems. This version isn't you, it's a performance. The second version is buried underneath, raw, unfiltered, untamed. This is the self you've been suppressing your entire life because you learned early that being real comes with consequences: rejection, judgment, isolation. So you hid. And the mask became so convincing, you forgot you were wearing it. This is what psychologists call individuation. The process of becoming who you actually are instead of who you pretend to be. It's the death of the false self and the birth of the authentic one. And it requires one thing most people will never do: disappearing from the world that created the mask. Machiavelli once said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." He understood that the persona is a tool, necessary for survival, but dangerous when it becomes your identity. Because here's what happens when you live through the mask for too long: you lose yourself completely. You become a reflection of everyone else's expectations, a puppet dancing to strings you can't even see. Your decisions aren't yours. Your thoughts aren't yours. Your entire existence is a reaction to external demands. You become controllable, predictable, safe. And safety is the death of power. Individuation is dangerous. It means rejecting the role society assigned you. It means questioning every belief you inherited. It means standing alone while everyone else follows the crowd. Most people can't handle that. They'd rather wear the mask forever than face the terror of not knowing who they are without it. But you're not most people. Strategic disappearance is the first step in killing the persona. When you withdraw from social expectations, when you stop performing, when you refuse to play the character everyone expects, the mask starts cracking. This is terrifying, because without the mask, you're exposed, vulnerable, undefined. But this is also freedom. In solitude, away from the noise, away from the expectations, away from the constant need to perform, you finally meet yourself, not the version you created to be liked, the version that exists beneath all the conditioning. This version is uncomfortable. It has edges. It doesn't apologize for existing. It doesn't bend to make others comfortable. It doesn't care about being accepted by people who only accept masks anyway. This version is uncontrollable. And that's exactly the point. When you detach from society's expectations, when you stop needing their approval, when you become willing to exist outside their understanding, you become dangerous. Not in a violent way, in a way that threatens the entire system of social control, because the system depends on conformity, on everyone playing their assigned roles, on people being more afraid of rejection than suppression. You stop being afraid, the system loses its grip on you. This is why individuation is so rare. Most people never attempt it. They spend their entire lives refining the mask, making it more convincing, hoping that if they perform well enough, they'll finally feel whole. They won't. The mask isn't designed to make you whole. It's designed to make you acceptable. And acceptable people have no power. Disappearing from the social stage forces the question, who are you when nobody's watching? When there's no audience to perform for? When approval is no longer available? That question destroys most people. They can't exist without external validation, without the feedback loop of social acceptance, without someone telling them they're doing it right. But if you can sit with that question, if you can exist in the discomfort of not knowing, if you can let the mask die without immediately creating a new one, something shifts. You stop being a reflection. You become a source. You stop reacting to the world. You start creating your own. And the moment you walk back into society as your authentic self, untamed, unapologetic, uncontrolled, people feel it. They don't know what changed, but they know something's different. You're no longer playing by the rules. You're no longer trying to fit in. You're playing a different game entirely. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I am uncontrollable. Number 4. Psychic energy and manipulation. Every reaction you give is energy transferred. Every argument, every defense, every explanation, every time you respond emotionally to someone's provocation, you just handed them your power. This is how manipulation works at its core. The manipulator doesn't win by being right. They win by making you react, because the moment you react, you're no longer in control. They are. They pushed a button. You responded. They trained you like a dog. And most people don't even realize it's happening. They think they're standing up for themselves, defending their position, making their case, setting boundaries. They're not. They're dancing to someone else's music. Machiavelli once said, The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. The trap isn't the situation. The trap is your emotional investment in it. Manipulators are psychic vampires. They feed on reaction, your anger, your frustration, your need to explain yourself, your desire to be understood. Every emotional response is a meal, and they're starving without it. This is why silence destroys them, not because silence is passive, because silence is refusal. Refusal to play, refusal to engage, refusal to give them the one thing they need, your energy. Watch what happens when you stop reacting, when someone throws bait and you don't bite, when they provoke and you stay calm, when they demand a response and you give them nothing. They escalate, they get louder, they try harder, they say worse things, because your reaction is their food and you just cut off their supply. This is psychological starvation, and it's brutal. The manipulator collapses without your participation. Their tactics only work if you engage. Their power only exists if you give it to them. Remove your energy from the equation, and they're left screaming into a void. This doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're smart. Smart enough to recognize that some battles aren't worth fighting, not because you can't win, because there's nothing to win. The entire game is designed to drain you, so you don't play. Here's the part that takes real discipline: staying silent when every fiber of your being wants to respond. When they say something untrue, when they twist your words, when they paint you as the villain, your ego screams to defend itself, to set the record straight, to make sure everyone knows the truth. But that's the trap. The truth doesn't matter to manipulators. They're not interested in facts. They're interested in reaction. And the moment you defend yourself, you've already lost. Because now you're explaining, justifying, proving, all of which signals that their opinion matters to you, that you need their understanding, that you're seeking their validation. You just gave them power. Strategic silence does the opposite. It signals that their opinion is irrelevant, that you don't need to be understood by them, that their entire attempt to manipulate you isn't worth your breath. This is maddening for manipulators, because they built their entire strategy around triggering you, around making you care, around pulling you into their reality. You refuse to enter. You stay in yours. And from your reality, their tactics look pathetic, desperate, transparent. This shift in perspective changes everything. You're no longer a participant. You're an observer. And observers don't get manipulated. They watch manipulation happen and choose not to engage. The energy you save by not reacting is energy you keep for yourself. Energy you can invest in things that actually matter, in goals, in growth, in building instead of defending. Manipulators steal years from people, not directly, by keeping them trapped in endless cycles of reaction. Defending, explaining, arguing, proving, all while life passes by unnoticed. You break the cycle by recognizing it for what it is, a game you don't have to play. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you train yourself in emotional sovereignty. You prove to yourself that external chaos doesn't have to create internal chaos, that someone else's dysfunction doesn't have to become yours. This is mastery, not over them, over yourself. And self-mastery is the only power that matters. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. Silence starves manipulation. Number 5. The power of silence. Silence is the most misunderstood weapon in human interaction. People think silence is absence. It's not. It's presence concentrated into its most potent form. Words scatter your power. They reveal your hand. They give people ammunition. They create opportunities for misunderstanding, misinterpretation, manipulation. Silence does none of that. Silence is a mirror. It reflects whatever the other person brings to it, and what people bring is always revealing. Watch what happens when you go quiet, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop filling every gap in conversation, when you let the space exist without rushing to fill it. People get uncomfortable. They start projecting. They fill the silence with their own assumptions, fears, guilt, insecurities. They tell on themselves without you saying a word. Machiavelli once said, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." But here's the deeper lesson. Silence creates both fear and fascination simultaneously. Because people can't categorize what they can't understand, and they can't understand silence, they're used to people who explain, who justify, who defend, who need to be understood. You don't need any of that, and it scares them. This isn't the silence of weakness. This isn't shutting down because you don't know what to say. This is the deliberate choice to withhold, to let your absence of words create more impact than words ever could. Strategic silence has weight. It communicates authority. It signals that you don't owe anyone an explanation, that your internal world is private, that access to your thoughts requires more than curiosity or demand. This drives people insane. They want in. They want to know what you're thinking. They want to crack the code. They want you to speak so they can categorize you, understand you, control you. Your silence denies them all of it. And in that denial, you become powerful. Because power isn't about dominating conversations. It's about dominating presence. The person who speaks least often speaks loudest. Their words carry weight because they're rare. Their opinions matter because they're not constantly given. You've seen this dynamic play out. The person who talks non-stop in meetings becomes background noise. But the person who sits quietly and then speaks once, everyone listens. Scarcity creates value. This applies to words as much as anything else. But strategic silence goes deeper than just speaking less. It's about creating psychological distance. When you refuse to engage verbally, you force people to deal with your absence instead of your explanation. Your silence becomes its own language, and unlike words, silence can't be argued with, can't be debated, can't be twisted. It just is. This makes people deeply uncomfortable, because humans are linguistic creatures. We solve problems through communication. We build understanding through dialogue. We resolve conflict through discussion. Silence rejects all of that. It says some things don't require discussion. Some conflicts don't require resolution. Some misunderstandings are fine, left misunderstood. This is heresy in a world that worships communication, where every problem supposedly has a verbal solution, where "we need to talk" is considered the answer to everything. Sometimes talk makes things worse. Sometimes explanation weakens your position. Sometimes the best response is none at all. Silence also protects you. Every word you speak is data, information people can use, analyze, weaponize. Your opinions become attack vectors. Your explanations become evidence. Your vulnerability becomes ammunition. Silence gives them nothing, and nothing is harder to attack than emptiness. People will try to provoke you out of silence. They'll accuse you of being cold, distant, manipulative. They'll say you're avoiding, running away, being unfair. Let them say it. Their discomfort with your silence reveals more about them than anything you could say reveals about you, because comfortable people don't demand explanations. Secure people don't need constant verbal reassurance. Confident people don't feel threatened by quiet. Only those who rely on words to control you get upset when words are removed. Your silence exposes their tactics. It reveals how much they depended on your willingness to engage, how much power they derived from pulling you into verbal exchanges you never needed to be in. When you remove yourself from those exchanges, not by announcing it, just by stopping, their entire strategy collapses. They're left arguing with silence, and nobody wins an argument with silence. This is dominance without aggression, power without confrontation, victory without battle. Machiavelli would approve. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My silence speaks. Number 6. Conscious unavailability. There's a phrase that needs to die. I'm always here if you need me. It sounds noble, supportive, kind. It's actually self-destruction wrapped in virtue, because making yourself constantly available doesn't make you valuable. It makes you a utility, something people use when convenient and forget when not. This is where most people go wrong. They confuse availability with importance. They think being accessible means being appreciated. They believe that the more they give, the more they'll be valued. Economics says otherwise, and human psychology follows economic principles whether we like it or not. Value is determined by scarcity, always. Things that are everywhere have no worth. Things that are rare become precious. Your time, your attention, your presence. When these things are unlimited, they're worthless. When they're limited, they're gold. Conscious unavailability is the decision to make yourself scarce on purpose, not because you're busy, not because you're avoiding people, because you understand that access to you should be earned, not assumed. Machiavelli once said, "Never appear too common." He wasn't talking about acting superior. He was talking about strategic scarcity, about understanding that the prince who mingles with peasants daily loses his mystique, his power, his authority. You don't have to be a prince. The principle applies regardless. When you're always available, always responsive, always willing to drop everything, you train people to expect it. They stop seeing your availability as a gift. They see it as an obligation. Your generosity becomes their entitlement. Then watch what happens when you can't be available, when you're actually busy, when you need to focus on yourself. They get annoyed, disappointed, even angry. How dare you not be there when they need you? You're always available. What changed? What changed is they got used to extracting value from you without reciprocating it. Conscious unavailability prevents this dynamic before it starts. It establishes from the beginning that your time has conditions, that access to you requires something: respect, reciprocity, consideration. This isn't selfishness, this is self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of all power. When you become consciously unavailable, you force people to think about you differently. They can't just assume you'll be there. They have to consider whether what they're asking is worth your time. They have to evaluate whether they've earned access to you. This filters your life automatically. People who don't respect your time remove themselves. They go find someone easier to use. Good. Let them. The people who remain are the ones who understand that valuable things aren't free, that your presence is a privilege, that time with you is something to appreciate, not expect. These are the only people worth having in your orbit anyway. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Becoming consciously unavailable means disappointing people. It means saying no. It means watching opportunities pass. It means accepting that some people will call you selfish, distant, or cold. They will. Let them. Because the alternative is spending your life being available to everyone except the person who matters most: yourself. Every yes to someone else is a no to yourself. Every time you make yourself available when you need rest, you're choosing their needs over yours. Every moment spent being accessible is a moment not spent building the life you actually want. This isn't balance. This is sacrifice. And sacrifice without reciprocity is just slow suicide. Conscious unavailability reclaims your life. It says your time is yours first. Your energy is yours to allocate. Your presence is your choice to give, not anyone's right to take. This creates a shift in how people approach you. They stop demanding. They start asking. They stop assuming. They start appreciating. Not because you announced new rules, because you embodied them. People respond to behavior, not declarations. You can tell someone you're not always available. They'll forget in a day, but show them through consistent action that your time is protected, and they'll learn fast. Some won't learn. They'll keep pushing, keep demanding, keep expecting you to bend. These people are teaching you something valuable. They don't respect you. They respect access to your resources. The moment you protect those resources, they reveal their true relationship with you. It was transactional all along. Conscious unavailability exposes these dynamics. It separates the people who value you from the people who value what you provide. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. Because a life surrounded by takers is a life spent empty. No matter how many people are around you, no matter how needed you feel, you're just a resource being drained. Conscious unavailability stops the drain. It makes your presence mean something again. It makes your time valuable again. It makes you someone worth earning, not someone always available for free. And here's the strangest part. When you become less available, the quality of your interactions improves dramatically. Because people show up differently when they know your time is limited. They're more present, more appreciative, more intentional. They don't waste your time because they know they might not get more of it. Scarcity creates quality. Abundance creates carelessness. This applies to your own relationship with yourself too. When you protect your time, when you make yourself unavailable to the world regularly, you finally have space to think, to create, to build, to exist without performing. You stop being a reaction machine and become a deliberate creator of your own life. That's not selfishness, that's sanity. Drop this affirmation in the comments. Access to me is earned. Number 7. Rebirth through solitude. Solitude terrifies most people, not because it's painful, because it's revealing. When you're alone, truly alone without distractions, without noise, without constant input, you're forced to confront yourself, the thoughts you've been avoiding, the truths you've been suppressing, the person you've become versus the person you meant to be. Most people can't handle it. They fill every moment with noise, social media, messages, shows, music, anything to avoid the silence. Because in silence, they might have to face the fact that they don't like who they've become. But solitude isn't punishment. It's purification. Every moment you spend in strategic solitude is a moment spent burning away the false, the conditioning, the masks, the borrowed beliefs, the parts of you that only exist because society demanded them. What remains after the burning is real. Machiavelli once said, "Men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear." But there's a third impulse he understood implicitly, the drive for authenticity, the need to become what you actually are instead of what everyone else needs you to be. That transformation only happens in solitude. Because society is a mirror that reflects back a distorted version of you, the version that fits, the version that doesn't threaten the status quo, the version that makes others comfortable. Solitude breaks the mirror. In the absence of external reflection, you're forced to generate your own, to determine your own worth, to define your own identity without reference to anyone else's opinion. This process is brutal. Most people abort it within days. They convince themselves they're lonely, that isolation is unhealthy, that they need connection. What they actually need is to avoid self-examination. Real solitude, the kind that transforms, isn't about physical isolation. You can be surrounded by people and still be in solitude if you're emotionally unavailable, if you've withdrawn your energy from external validation. This is loneliness of the strong, the deliberate choice to exist separate from the herd, to think thoughts that aren't approved, to pursue goals that aren't understood, to become someone that society didn't design. It's lonely because you're no longer playing the game everyone else is playing. You're not competing for the same prizes, not following the same rules, not seeking the same approval. You're on a different path entirely, and most people will never understand that path. They'll call you cold, distant, changed. They'll say you're not the person you used to be. They're right, you're not. You killed that person in solitude. This death is necessary. The old self, the one built on pleasing others, on fitting in, on being acceptable, has to die for the real self to emerge. And it dies slowly, in quiet moments, in long periods of being unavailable, in the uncomfortable space between who you were and who you're becoming. Solitude is the furnace. You're the metal. What comes out the other side is harder, sharper, refined. But the process isn't comfortable. You'll question everything. You'll doubt your choices. You'll wonder if you're making a mistake by withdrawing. You'll feel the pull to go back to how things were. Don't. That pull is weakness disguised as connection. It's the part of you that's still addicted to external validation, that still needs approval, that still believes your worth comes from other people. Sit with the discomfort. Let it teach you. Because on the other side of that discomfort is something most people never experience: self-reliance. Not the practical kind, the psychological kind, the kind where you genuinely don't need anyone's opinion to know who you are, where your sense of self isn't dependent on social feedback, where you can exist completely independent of whether anyone understands or approves. This is freedom, real freedom. Not the fake freedom of doing whatever you want, the deep freedom of being whoever you are without apology or explanation. And it only comes through solitude, because solitude removes all the crutches, all the validation, all the distractions that kept you from confronting yourself. What you confront in solitude might not be pretty. You'll see your weaknesses, your patterns, your ways of avoiding responsibility, the lies you've been telling yourself, the ways you've been complicit in your own limitation. But you'll also see your potential, the parts of you that got suppressed, the strength you never used, the thoughts you never voiced, the life you never built because you were too busy maintaining relationships that didn't serve you. Solitude gives you the space to rebuild, not back into what you were, into something new, something designed by you, for you, according to your actual values instead of inherited ones. This rebuilding takes time. It's not a weekend retreat. It's months, maybe years, of consistent separation from the noise, of protecting your mental space, of refusing to let others colonize your thoughts with their agendas. During this time, you'll lose people. Guaranteed. People who were attached to the old version of you. People who benefited from your availability. People who liked you better when you were easier to control. Good. Those weren't your people anyway. The people who remain, or the people you attract after this transformation, are different. They're not there for what you give them. They're there because of who you are, and who you are is finally authentic. This is the rebirth, not a metaphor, an actual psychological death and resurrection. The person who emerges from sustained solitude isn't the person who entered it. They're colder, sharper, more focused, less interested in approval, less affected by criticism, less willing to compromise on things that matter. They're harder to manipulate because they've spent time alone with their own mind and learned to trust it. They're harder to control because they've defined their own values and committed to them. They're harder to break because they've already been broken and rebuilt themselves stronger. This is what Machiavelli meant when he talked about being a lion and a fox. The solitude makes you a lion, powerful, confident, dangerous. The experience of it makes you a fox, smart, strategic, able to recognize traps. When you return to the world after this transformation, people feel the difference immediately. You're no longer performing, no longer seeking, no longer explaining. You're just existing, powerfully, unapologetically, independently, and your absence, the time you spent in solitude, now becomes your weapon, because people know you can disappear. You've done it before. You'll do it again. Access to you isn't guaranteed. This makes your presence valuable, your time precious, your attention meaningful. You've completed the transformation from resource to force, from someone who reacts to the world to someone who shapes it. And it all started when you had the courage to disappear. So here's where we are. You've been given 7 laws, 7 principles that separate those who get used from those who hold power, 7 truths that most people will spend their entire lives avoiding, because these truths are uncomfortable. To accept loneliness in exchange for authenticity, to become someone that society doesn't understand and might not accept. Most people won't make that trade. They'll choose comfort over power, connection over clarity, being liked over being respected. They'll stay in their patterns, always available, always explaining, always seeking approval from people who don't deserve the authority to give it. They'll wonder why nothing changes, why people keep taking advantage, why their worth never seems to match their effort, and they'll never realize the answer is simple. They made themselves too common. You're different, or at least you can be. You're holding information that changes the game completely. The understanding that absence creates value, that withdrawal isn't weakness, that strategic unavailability is self-respect made visible. But information alone doesn't change anything. Action does. And the action required is simple, but brutal. Disappear. Not forever, not dramatically, strategically. Stop being so available. Stop explaining yourself to people who wouldn't understand anyway. Stop giving your energy to situations that drain you. Stop performing for an audience that isn't even paying attention. Pull back, get quiet, protect your time like it's the most valuable resource you have, because it is. Watch what happens. Some people will panic. Some will get angry. Some will disappear from your life completely. Perfect. They were supposed to. Because the people who stay, the ones who adapt, who respect the change, who value you enough to earn access, those are your people. Everyone else was just using the old version of you, the version that said yes to everything, the version that explained itself, the version that needed approval. That version is dead now, or at least it should be. What replaces it is someone else entirely. Someone harder to reach, harder to manipulate, harder to predict. Someone who understands that power doesn't come from being everywhere. It comes from being selective about where you show up. This transformation won't be celebrated by everyone. The world prefers compliant people, people who stay in their lane, who don't